Hello, 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 and welcome to Updog Sports Talk. My name is Matt Miller. Joining me today is my very good friend, Justin McGovern. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, ready to talk about our next three conferences here, the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac 12. So, if you are just joining us, we are in the middle of a series right now where we are recapping the 2024 college football seasons for each conference. If you missed us last week, we recapped the SEC, the Big 10, and independents. This week, we'll be talking about the Big 12, the ACC, and the Pac 12. So, who had a great season? Who failed? Find out in a moment.
And as a show, we pride ourselves on representing everybody, not just the LeBron Jameses, LA Lakers, Dallas Cowboys, Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes's, all them. We like to talk about the little guy too. Um, so we started up during COVID, and we pride ourselves on being a representation of the little voice. So to get right into our show today, Justin. Yeah.
Now, they transitioned us to a conference that it feels like they would fit better in. The ACC. Oh, Matt's changing hats here.
Yeah, I had to change
Oh,
hats. I had to show the world that I bought this hat a year before Bill Belichick got hired. Just
ooh.
so people didn't think I was a bandwagon fan.
Well, we're not in North Carolina yet. We'll get to them. As a reminder, this is in alphabetical order. Let's start out with the Boston College Eagles. First year head coach of Bill O'Brien. They went 7-6.
I think that's good for Boston College. I give them a C. Um, Decent improvement in Billy O'Stooge's first year up in Boston College. A lot of promise for the future, but we'll see where that goes. But um, it seemed like you could see flashes of like what this team could be, like what their full potential is. And then other times they just like, I don't know, just put it in neutral and forgot to put it back in gear.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they had a pretty solid year. Um, you know, First year at the program, not a program that's had a lot of success lately. Finishing with a winning record to start out is a very positive step to the Bill O'Brien era, showing that maybe he may not be a stooge after all. I gave him a B for this. I think it was a very solid year for them. Next, oh my, we're not in the Pac-12 yet, guys. I promise, we're not in the Pac-12 yet. The California Golden Bears. In their first year in the ACC, I think a lot of Cal's involvement in the ACC was actually off the field and mainly on Twitter because we saw their fan base just get wild and weird. And I don't know why this move reinvigorated their fan base, but it did. And that was a lot of fun. The algorithm was unleashed in 2024. On the field, they went 6-7, had a really rough stretch of one-score losses. This season could have been better than what it was.
Yeah, I think it's because they had such a big stretch of one score losses. I gave them a C. It's their first year in a new conference, having to travel all the way to the East Coast for 6+ games a year. Um, Probably one of the furthest travel schedules outside of Hawaii. Um, and they managed it halfway decent. Their fan base is like a fire got lit underneath them. Um, Normally I give first year teams and conferences that do not great, I'll give them a C minus. But they deserve to see. I mean, they were a couple of plays away from having a decent season.
Yeah, I give them a C as well. They didn't have high expectations, so I wanted to take that into account. But at the same time, the grade also couldn't be higher because you know they had a lot of opportunities in front of them. Like I think it was a stretch of 4 one-score losses, and they probably should have won all 4 of those games. There's a game against Florida State where they gave Florida State their only FBS win. We'll talk about that in a moment. They had college game day in town against Miami. The stadium was rocking like it hadn't done in years. They had that game in the bag, parked the bus too soon, and lost. They blew a double-digit lead to NC State. Like they just had these games throughout the year that went this way. And you reverse those. Cal finishes the job in those games, and they have 10 wins. And all of a sudden, this team is towards the top of the ACC. But they couldn't finish the job. But there's at least a few points now where you're thinking, okay, maybe there's positive momentum here. Maybe this thing could go pretty well in the ACC. Next, we talk about the Clemson Tigers. Clemson opened the season with a disaster against Georgia, and then all of a sudden their offense had liftoff for a bit. But everyone kind of wondered, the schedule wasn't tough. Was this real? And then they lost to Louisville, and it was like, ooh, this might not be real after all. And really, towards the end, like it just kept going that way. They lost to South Carolina as well. But then Clemson turned it around all of a sudden. They upset SMU in the ACC championship to reach the college football playoff as a spoiler team. And
As
then
a
in the
three-loss
playoff,
team.
having to travel to Texas, they gave Texas a tough battle for all 4 quarters and came close to winning that game. Ultimately, the run defense let them down. I think Clemson, in the end, ended up setting themselves the building blocks to return to national championship contention in 2025.
I agree. I gave them a B plus simply because they won the ACC championship game, but there's a certain standard at Clemson, and it's championship or bust every year because of what Dabo Swinney has done to this program. They put themselves into position. They got close to upsetting Texas, and I don't know how much further they would have gotten because there were some pretty good teams down the road, but Clemson had a solid year compared to the last few years. I think they needed a little bit of a reset. I think there was a little bit of uncertainty with the TV deal, and I think that affected somewhat the recruiting because they didn't know what conference Clemson was going to be in. And
well, the elephant in the room was, Dabo did not want to use the portal as well.
Yeah, and in today's day and age, you got to use the portal. But B plus, you won the ACC championship, made to the college football playoff as a 3-loss team, and you're still putting yourself in position to win. So maybe next year.
I ended up giving them a B just because some of those losses were rough. They lost to their biggest rival. So I did have to dock them for that. But I echo the same sentiments you do. We saw this offense really evolve. Cade Klubnik turned into the top quarterback he was originally expected to be. And, we really saw this offense see liftoff. They're making changes this offseason on defense. If they get back up to a good level, watch out for Clemson as a national title contender in 2025. Now we look at the Florida State Seminoles.
No. Duke. If we're going alphabetical order, you have to put Duke in there.
Yes, we gotta do Duke.
Justin forgot to type in Duke. So I'll go ahead and start. Malik Murphy transfers from Texas to go to Duke. It looked like a very solid year, very promising year, and it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. They ended up finishing 5th Um, Justin, you have more facts?
Yeah, I think this team was very odd to watch because Manny Diaz came in. He wanted to install a fast-paced offense to go along with his defense, and they tried to be a fast-paced offense. It never could really get it going, and they would spend 3 quarters just kind of being stuck in space, and then all of a sudden they would get it together in the fourth quarter and win the game. They stole a lot of games they shouldn't have won this year.
Yeah, they were my. I can't remember if I think they were my 1B sleeper team in this conference, and they ended up fifth. Nobody really had any like stock in what they were gonna do. I think they over performed to expectations. It's going to be tough to live up to that again next year, but this past year, I wanted to see more from them, but I mean, they're still top 5 in the conference, so can't really complain terribly much about that.
Yeah. And, most notably, they beat the other teams in the state. Beat NC State, beat North Carolina. Those are some big wins as well. So, that always feels good for a Duke fan when they have wins over those teams. A very, very solid debut for Manny Diaz. And it feels like they're building momentum to keep it going for 2025. Now, next, sorry, I guess I got too excited for this one. Florida State Seminoles. This requires no introduction. Everyone that would be watching this video is very well aware what an utter collapse this was. Coming off an undefeated regular season last year, they faded to 2-10. They were college football's most unmitigated disaster on the field.
Yeah. F minus. You go undefeated, you get left out of the college football playoff for whatever reason, and then you followed up with this just god awful performance. I don't know how Mike Norvell still has a job, to be 100% honest.
Well, technically, I'm sure he still has it because they did go undefeated the season before.
They almost went
left
winless.
left out on something that was not of his accord. So I think we learned one season cannot fire a coach, but I mean, this is just a massive fall. This is a team that obviously Norvell seems to, he was relying on the portal a lot and came back to bite him this year. Their portal additions mostly did not work out. They were awful in the trenches for most of the season. Couldn't find a solution at quarterback. Just everything went wrong. Everything went wrong. And this is what happens. This is what can happen to you when everything goes wrong.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, by the way, I gave him an F minus minus. I wanted to create a different grade just for this team.
In fact, it's warranted. Because if you give them an F, just a regular F, I feel like no other team deserves an F at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the standard for being bad and having a disaster of a season. This is it right here.
Yeah.
On a more positive note, we move to the other team that played in Ireland to open out the year, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Facing a very, very difficult schedule entering the season, but Georgia Tech went 7-6, finished a winning record. It feels like Brent Key is building something here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I give him a C. They did go 7-6, so I can't really go too much higher than that, but they handled it pretty well. It would be nice to see a Georgia Tech team rise up the ranks. Now, personally, I believe they belong in SEC, like they did, like they were years and years ago. But I mean, you finished 7th, so you're above. You're in the top half of the conference, so that's a plus.
Yeah, it was a very, very solid season. You know, they got the headline win over the Miami Hurricanes. That felt good. Um, you know, they kind of had to deal with some injury issues at quarterback. I think that kind of held them back a little bit. So I gave them a B minus. I think, you know, facing a tough schedule and dealing with what they had to deal with, I think they did a pretty solid job. You know, almost beat Georgia in Athens. That was pretty incredible too. In that eight overtime game. Obviously, we're on the wrong end of a lot of calls there. We can talk about that all day. But it was a very good year for Georgia Tech, and it feels like they're just getting better.
Yeah.
Next up, the Louisville Cardinals. Once again, winning 9 games with Jeff Brom, he instantly has made them towards the top of the ACC again, going 9-4. Louisville's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, after spending quite a few years near the bottom of the conference, they upset Notre Dame a few years ago, and it seems like ever since that win, they've been on the rise, and they had a solid year this year. Now, when we watched them, they didn't look like anything special, but they just started pulling away from Jacksonville State. So it's just like they have that little bit of difference on the field that creates enough of a separation for the score to keep going up. So I give them B minus.
Yeah, they were a very good and talented team. Like they were very good, I would say. They were not elite enough to win the conference, but they were extremely solid. I gave them a B plus. It was a good year. Obviously, there's some moments they wish they could add back. The Stanford loss was particularly pretty rough. Not just losing to Stanford was bad enough, but also the way they lost that game. They could probably stand to have back, which that held them back from a 10-win season. And I mean, really in general, like they lost all of these games by 1 score. So they were in it. They were in it the whole way. Beat Clemson. Louisville could definitely continue to improve. I think Jeff Brom will win an ACC championship before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Now we look at another contender in the conference, the Miami Hurricanes. They had one of the top quarterbacks in college football, Cam Ward. They had a great offense in general, but still could not reach the college football playoff. The question is now, is Mario Cristobal already hitting a ceiling at Miami, or is this just the beginning for them?
I think he hit his ceiling. But next year, I think they're going to take a step back. I don't have as much faith in Carson Beck as I do Cam Ward. I gave him a B because Cristobal was on my hot seat list to start the season. It just seems like nothing was improving. And then like they had a solid year, but they were the favorites to win this conference. They finished 3rd, missed the college football playoff, missed the ACC championship game. Overall, just looking at it, solid season, but it could have been way better.
Yeah, this is a hard one to grade because on one hand, this is the best season the Miami Hurricanes have had in some time. I think they've only won. This is like the second time, like the last decade, they won 10 games. So that was really, really good. On the other hand, it felt like this team should have made the playoff, and they found, in their fans' eyes, like very aggravating ways to miss the playoff. You know, losing to a Georgia Tech team that was battling through quarterback injuries. And then blowing a 21-0 lead to lose to Syracuse to end the year. And at that point, not only get themselves out of the playoff, but even miss the ACC championship after leading the conference most of the year. Those were just very aggravating ways to end the season. And I think that's, you know, where you deal with the frustration. You know, obviously, defense definitely had its blame as well. They found themselves in a lot of tight games because their defense couldn't get stops. So now they're revamping that side of the ball. I think we're going to get that answer in 2025. Because it's going to be up to the defense to answer the bell. I will put it on record here that I think Carson Beck is the most overrated transfer portal move this offseason.
Yes.
Because people are hyping up. I don't think he's great. He's just okay. So you just went from an excellent quarterback to an okay quarterback. But you still have talent around him. You could still make this happen, but it's going to be up to that defense to get better. And that's going to be the interesting thing to monitor this offseason. Next, we look at the NC State Wolfpack. And this program is just always stuck in this purgatory. They entered this season in the preseason top 25. People were talking about, hey, maybe if they play their cards right, maybe this team can break into the playoff in the first year. Maybe they can win the ACC. Well, as it goes, when NC State has expectations, they fell flat and went 6-7 on the year. They just can't break the pattern.
What NC State or what Louisville did is what I thought NC State was going to do. I didn't necessarily think that they were going to win the conference, but I thought they had promise. I give them a D because they didn't quite live up to expectations. They just did the same thing they always do.
I was very disappointed. I gave them a D. The only reason why it wasn't worse was they did beat North Carolina, and that definitely was a big deal. But yeah, this program is just always stuck in this routine. They disappoint when they have expectations, and then when they don't have expectations, they come out of nowhere and win 9 games. So, obviously this is not financial advice, but certainly one of my favorite bets to do each offseason is look at what NC State's expectations are. If there's high expectations, I like to bet the under on their win total. If they have no expectations, I bet the over on their win total.
It's not an exact science.
It's one of my favorite ones to do because they just follow the same pattern. Like they just always do this. But yeah, 6-7 is just not what they had in mind. The offense just didn't click as expected, and Grayson McCall got hurt. The defense had been really solid for a long time, but they had a very senior-heavy group in 2023. And, if those guys gone, the defense regressed and wasn't there to back up an offense that didn't quite click. So that was a big reason why they dropped off. Now, they'll be looking to try to jump back in and win 9 games next year. Now we look at the other team in North Carolina, the North Carolina Tar Heels. It was kind of a weird season last year because, with Drake May gone and some other talented players, no one really knew what to expect of them, but I think the season they had was not what people expected. They never seemed to find a quarterback. They had the wild 70-50 loss to James Madison. 53-21 was the score of that game at halftime. And they had some other games that they let slip away. So finishing 6-7 was not what they had in the cards. Out with Mac Brown, in with Bill Belichick.
Definitely one of the more interesting hires. Wouldn't have expected it, but I like it. I think that this past season was a huge disappointment. I don't think it was a failure, so I'm not going to use my normal Step Brothers quote, but because you finished above the newcomers and a few other teams that have been in the conference, but expectations were a lot higher this team. And I give them a D. I mean, you can't come out and lose like that to James Madison, no matter how much we like James Madison.
I gave him a D as well. Obviously I graded him pretty lowly when the season was bad enough to get a coach fired. So
Yeah, but I do like the Bill
but the good news
Belichick
is,
hired.
yeah, the good news is I think it's an exciting future in Chapel Hill.
Yes.
Now we look at one of the wildest teams of the year, the Pitt Panthers. Entering the season, we made sure to mention, we aren't sure what to expect of this team because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Pitt was running the air raid. And it worked. It worked really well to start out the year. Pitt was off to a 7-0 start. Heinz Field, or whatever it's called these days, was absolutely rocking on a Thursday night when they got, I think, like 3 pick sixes of Kyle McCord and blew out Syracuse. Pitt was in the college football playoff conversation. And then, going to a huge showdown against SMU, who we'll talk about shortly, it all came apart at the seams. It fell apart. Pitt lost their last 6 games and finished with a 7-6 record.
I gave him a D plus. The plus is because they won the first 7 and then lost the next 6. It seemed like this was going to be an exciting team. I mean, I know we've said that about a few of these teams, but Pitt was the one that we were looking at and we were like, wow, they can compete with the Clemsons of the world and the Miamis and the undefeated Florida States. They can compete. What can they do this year? They came out extremely hot. Everybody was like, wow. You know what it reminds me of? That year the Steelers went 11-0 and then lost out.
They've been seeing this a lot in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they're used to this by now.
Oh, my. Both college and NFL.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Pitt did lose a few key players, but you just can't lose the second half of your schedule like that. You have to try to win at least one game, You can't win the first half, lose the second half.
So I gave them a C. And the reason that is, I did grant them an exception because a big part of that ending losing streak was the fact that they lost their quarterback, Eli Holstein. He was playing very well and made this air raid offense go. And it just was not the same without him. It really wasn't. He tried to come back at one point. Like, I think against Louisville. He was still not doing well. He was taken out. And yeah, as a result, like, this team just never was the same again. So I did grant them that, but at the same time, it was very disappointing to lose 6 in a row after the 7-0 start, for sure. It felt like you lost all the momentum that you originally got. Next on our list, mentioning momentum, the SMU Mustangs. There's more momentum in Dallas than ever right now. They entered this new conference. People wondered, how would a team transition from the American to the ACC? I think one thing that was very rare about this transition was, they were transitioning at the top of their game, and they showed it. SMU went undefeated in conference play in the regular season and rolled to a college football playoff game. How about those Mustangs?
Dude, I give them an A plus. What a heck of a season. SMU may not be back to what they were in the early 80s, but now that you can pay players, maybe they can get back up there. They have a big city, so they got a really good TV market. They're in a conference that may not be that close to them. So the rivalry aspect will be a little awkward, but I think because ACC is like the shallowest of all the Power 4 conferences, I think SMU can stick up to the top for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a train that's rolling and isn't going to stop anytime soon. This team is definitely going to be a contender moving forward. Obviously I think there's going to be some regression this next year just because of the sheer volume of talent they lose at receiver and defensive line. But this run in 2024 is going to be remembered for a very long time. I mean, they didn't just like blow through the ACC; like they went undefeated and really blew a lot of teams out. Like hardly any of those games were close. Now, obviously there's some things they'll need to clean up. Their big Achilles heel was way too many turnovers. They played sloppy against BYU, lost that game early in the year. Got extremely sloppy against Clemson and Penn State and lost those games. Just too many turnovers, too many mistakes. That's what bit them in the rear in that one and prevented them from doing even more. But it's hard to take away from this team, though. I gave them an A+ as well, just because, this is a very incredible season for the Mustangs.
Yes.
Next, we go to the Stanford Cardinal. There's really no other way to put it. This is a long rebuild, and it's a work in progress. But and by the way, the schedule they had was brutal. They had one FCS team, but also had a non-conference schedule that included games against Notre Dame and TCU. So very few breaks along the way. They went 3-9, but pulled a couple really shocking upsets.
Yeah, I gave them a D-. I think the fact that they pulled those upsets was the difference between me giving them an F and giving me a D-. I know they had to travel very far, but they're in the midst of an absurdly long rebuild. They have history in this program, and right now, that history isn't getting them any recruits. So they're in the midst of a long program. They're not really showing any progression to getting back to what they once were. I mean, Stanford, you got to pay the travel bill, I guess, since you joined the ACC. So D-.
I give them a C-. They played a tough schedule. I mean, everyone had this team pegged dead last in the ACC. They did not finish there. They pulled off a few upset wins. I really, there's not a whole lot more I could have asked for from them. Just because, the schedule did them no favors. They managed to get in a lot of weird games this year. They played a late night, Friday night opener against TCU, and they couldn't come out with a win in that one, despite the fact that TCU just could not stop making mistakes the whole way. And then, they get in another weird Friday night game against Syracuse, and all of a sudden, Stanford took advantage of Syracuse's mistakes and managed to get a field goal to win that one. And then, they do the same thing against Louisville weeks later. I think those are very nice building blocks to win, but building block wins, I should say. But this is a long rebuild, and it's going to take some time. I don't think, it didn't help that, they lost both their quarterbacks to the portal this year. So I don't know when they're going to get this thing back on track.
Yeah,
I also don't think
it's going to be a while. But you know what? We have talked way longer about Stanford than I originally thought.
Yeah. Plus, they don't really have a fan base to look at this anyways. Sorry, we love all programs, but we also want programs to care about the program. Syracuse Orange, a bold move hiring Fran Brown. He was just a defensive backs coach at Georgia, but known as a tremendous recruiter coming in. And, we thought, when we looked at them entering the season, we were like, he's got a better buzz around Syracuse than we've seen in a long time. But how is this thing going to look on the field? Well, we got our answer. It looked great. They went 10-3.
They were my sleeper team. I think McCord transferring away from Ohio State removed all expectations. Nobody had a single expectation of McCord this year, and he played extremely well. I would have put him higher in the Heisman voting, but Syracuse, they were my sleeper team. They finished 4th. They're going to be good for a while. I mean, Fran Brown, you could see his recruiting prowess in the portal, bringing all these guys in to make sure that he had a competitive team on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. He recruited well in the portal, bringing guys in, bringing in freshmen that are going to be good. They had an exciting team right away, and it's going to be very cool to continue to see this program build. 10-3 in his first year was absolutely incredible. And now, Syracuse football is cool again, and that's very fun to see. I give them an A+ for it. They surpassed expectations and just looked great doing so.
Oh, I don't remember if I gave my grade, but I gave an A-.
Maybe the only place I could have docked them was that Stanford loss. That one kind of hurt a little bit, but otherwise, they looked great. And I'm excited to see them continue to try to maintain the momentum. It's going to be tough. I don't know if you've seen your 2025 schedule yet, but it is one of the hardest in the country.
Brutal.
So that will hurt some of their momentum, but in general, they're looking pretty good. Next, we look at that Virginia Cavaliers. This is, a bit of a rebuilding process, but the one positive that we could point to was, hey, Virginia returns a lot of guys, but the downside was Virginia also played a very difficult schedule. They went 5-7 against the schedule.
Yeah, I give them a D. I somehow stumbled upon Virginia section of Twitter one time, and it seemed like those fans were very optimistic. I don't know if they're what Kirk Herbstreit likes to call the fringe fans, but they seem very optimistic of this team, and I give them a D just because they couldn't handle business.
I give them a C+. I found, I thought they did good considering the schedule. I think the schedule was it was too brutal of a schedule to make a bowl bid happen. I would have liked to see it, but it just was, they just didn't quite get there, they pulled off some nice wins along the way. Beating Boston College is really good. And, there's finally some positive momentum. But now the question is going to be this offseason, how can they capitalize on that? And I haven't looked at their schedule in 2025 enough yet, but I believe it's going to be easier than 2024 one. So, they just need to get a little bit better, and they could probably even make their way to at least a bowl bid next year, but we shall see.
Yeah.
Now we look at across the state at the Virginia Tech Hokies. This is a team that was one of the hot teams of the offseason. This is the team that everyone loved to talk about when previewing the ACC. It was like, man, here we go. Lane State is going to be rocking. Virginia Tech's going to finally be back to playing good football on the field. And it didn't happen. They really made no progress at all. They went 6-7. I think they actually regressed on the record. Just a very disappointing 2024 season.
Yeah, they have the coolest entrance in college football. They had a lot of promise this season, but Virginia Tech just came out and did nothing with it. So much promise, and they fell flat on their faces. Give them a D. Maybe that's a little harsh. Maybe it could be bumped up just a little bit, but expectations were high. Everyone thought that they were going to be way more competitive, and they were not.
Yeah. I mean, I gave them a D as well. You know, they went 6-7, but it could have easily been a lot better than that. They mismanaged so many late game situations or just the start of games. Like there was something wrong like most of their games this year. Like, the opener against Vanderbilt, they just started too slow and, they tried to make a comeback and then lost that game in overtime. Against Rutgers, they started too slow, lost that game. Against Miami, just mismanaged the end of that game, let that one slip away. Now, you could talk about the controversial review at the end of the game all you want, but in the end, they did mismanage the ending of that game. And they just saw so many games go like that throughout the year, where they just let it slip away. And that's why they severely underachieved. There's going to be a lot of pressure to try to get this thing going next year. Kyron Drones is back. They have an offensive coordinator change. So, is their new coordinator going to get things back going? That's going to be the question.
We shall see.
Now we wrap up the ACC by talking about Wake Forest. This program, it was not that long ago that this program played in the ACC championship. And, the slow mesh was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to use in the game. But I think it relies heavily on quarterback play. And for years now, Wake Forest has been struggling to find an answer to that position. They end up falling to 4-8.
Yeah,
Happened?
It was a nail in the coffin to Dave Clawson's career. Forced him to go into retirement. I like Wake Forest. I like Dave Clawson, but the season was a bit of a disappointment, especially since they're only a couple years removed from being one of the best teams in the conference. So I gave him a D.
I give them a C minus. But yeah, it definitely was a tough year for them. They didn't look competitive a lot of the time. But where I get worried about this program is just like how are they built to compete in this NIL era? They just it seems to be harder for them to get the recruits in here. And I think in a way that ended up being what drove Dave Clawson to retirement. I think he was tired of the way this was going and, eventually took away his love for the game. And that's why this team kind of fell off a little bit.
Yep.
Now, we'll see what's next. New head coach. Are they going to be as creative on offense now? That'll be the question. But it definitely is it's a tough time to be Wake Forest right now, I think.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some sorting out.
From a conference point of view, before we move on, if I'm I don't remember the ACC commissioner's name, but if I'm the ACC commissioner, I strike a deal with the Pac-12 now that they're bouncing back, and I send Cal and Stanford back. I talk the Big Ten into sending me Maryland, and I try to nab James Madison from the depths of college football into my conference. And I think that would make it super competitive.
Matt, this isn't college football 25. We're here to give the people a break from realignment talk.
I want James Madison in the ACC, damn it.
That would be a lot of fun. I don't know if Virginia Tech quite want them there.
Who cares what they want? They got D grades.
Actually, you know what? This actually brings a good question. The struggles that Virginia and Virginia Tech are having in recent years, do you think that is caused because there's more FBS teams in Virginia now? And not just FBS teams in Virginia, but good ones in Liberty and James Madison.
Yeah, I think they're sucking the aura from Virginia and Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech has had their ups and downs. I don't think they've ever been consistently across the board a great team. I think they go through periods of being great, and then they have a couple of years of a rebuild, and then they're great, and then Virginia, I feel like they're mainly near the bottom all the time, and then have little spikes in. Oh, it was a good year. I think personally, I think conferences need to go back to aligning more around region. That way, like there will be bragging rights throughout regions of the country. Be like Big Ten is mainly Midwest, so you would have Midwest teams. And if Ohio State wins, then the Midwest gets to brag over everybody else and be like, "Hey, the Midwest is the best." You know?
Yeah, I agree. I miss it. We need to be back for that. We could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I do think that Virginia Tech, they used to thrive on finding those underrated kids in their state. And now, instead those kids are going to Liberty and James Madison and having success there. I think that has negatively impacted Virginia Tech's program. It'll be interesting to continue to see how it goes. At least your realignment talk transitions us to our final conference, the conference where the biggest mess was made because of realignment. Pac-12.
Pac-2.
We start this off with our Pac-12 champions, the Oregon State Beavers. This team entered the year just extremely decimated by the portal. All the uncertainty, their coach leaving all of his coach gear at Goodwill, completely just decimated everything they had going. Tons of people left in the portal, and we kind of saw that go on throughout the season. They kind of started out looking okay. They had more injuries on defense, didn't have the depth to withstand those injuries, and then ended up 5-7. But they did win. They did win the game that mattered, which was the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah. They are 1-0 in Pac-2 play, and therefore they won the conference. I give Oregon State a C+. I mean, granted, like everything that was thrown at them, the entire coaching staff leaving, all their top players leaving, injuries, this, that, and the other. They walked away with a 5-7 record and were conference champions. You got to hand it to them. I give them a C+. The plus for winning the championship, the C for like not having high expectations and kind of delivering. I wanted it to go higher than that, but I mean they still had a losing record. So what do you think?
Yeah, I had the exact same grade. C+ because they didn't overachieve or underachieve. They were kind of in a difficult spot. Looked like a team that was in a difficult spot. But plus, they did win the conference. And now go down the record books. It was an absolutely electric game on the CW too. And the fans stormed the field and everything. Like that was a good moment for a program that had gone through a long. So I think the future is looking better. We'll get a better measure for the Trent Bray era in 2025. So it'll be kind of interesting to monitor that. But we wrap this up tonight's show with the Washington State Cougars. And this team was a playoff contender at one point. They only had one loss. They were, I think, like 17th in the college ball playoff rankings, looking really good. And then it kind of just came apart at the seams. They lost their last 4 games. It was a rough finish after a strong start.
I give them a B for the strong start. They didn't win the conference. They didn't finish strong, but they were a very surprising team. Most expectations of this conference were they were going to be some of the worst teams in college football, and Washington State was like, nope, we're here. So B. I want to see more from them next year, though. And we'll have a lot more to talk about the conference next year.
Well, no, they'll be in the same alignment next year. That's the year after. But so this segment will be this long next year as well. But I gave him a C plus. The finish was kind of hard to stomach, and in a way, you could kind of start to see it coming. What happened was the offense. I think some of our friends named them the Mateers Privateers was one of the fun names I saw thrown around for them. But I mean, really, it was John Mateer, the quarterback, had to make everything happen. He didn't have a strong supporting cast. No run game to speak of. Offensive line kind of struggled. He had to make everything happen. And when you couple that with the defense falling apart during the last month, this is what you get. And obviously, it was a tough stretch to end there. Losing to New Mexico, losing at home to Wyoming. The bowl game was a disaster. So, not exactly the best momentum to end the year, but in general, you look at the season with a full picture. It was a good, solid season. 8-5 is definitely a fine record. But now it's an interesting offseason because the coach left. Lots of guys left in the portal, but they hired South Dakota State's coach and imported a bunch of their players. So
Nice.
it's going to be a very intriguing team to watch next year.
I think NCAA also has their eyes on what Washington State does next year, because if they bring in most of South Dakota State's players and then end up having a really good team, I think at that point NCAA would be like, all right, let's see how we can get North Dakota State and South Dakota State into FBS.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that are pushing for that, and then there's others that aren't. So it'll be an interesting thing to kind of see.
That concludes this week's 35 team rundown and grades. We have now gone through 70 teams, Justin.
Wow.
In 2 episodes.
How about that?
Yeah.
We're making this happen.
And we're verified on Twitter. We're verified on Instagram and Threads and Facebook. Still working on verification on TikTok, so that's probably going to be a little bit. But
we're real people.
Yeah, and we're real business.
And Threads, I guess, still a thing.
Yeah. Not a whole lot of action on there. Most of my notifications are picked for you, and I don't know how to get rid of those, and the internet keeps telling me one thing, and I try to do it, and that setting's already off, so I don't know how I get notifications.
I still find it very funny that Threads, they wanted to copy Twitter, but they didn't realize what group of people, what demographic goes to Twitter, which the main demographic of Twitter, the main reason why it even exists is because of sports fans. And the whole thread setup
and degenerates
is basically like terrible for sports fans because I remember seeing like nothing is in chronological order. You can't even choose what you see on there. Like it just sounds all bad.
Yeah, we're on there just for the sake of being on there because it's free and it's included with Instagram and Facebook.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, so exciting things over here at Updog Sports Talk.
Yeah.
You can find us on all of those platforms, including Podbean, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we're there. We're on social media. We're a YouTube channel. So yeah, like, subscribe, show some love, tell your friends about us. We're trying to grow this thing and give representation to all. So America, and anything else, Justin?
No, that's it. America, get ready because I believe we're going to be talking about the American Conference next time.
Nice. I just read a whole article about them yesterday, and it was really long, and I'm excited to share some thoughts on Tulane. But yeah, that's it. We'll catch you guys next time. See you around. Good show.